Okay, everybody, I'm here with my friend Justin. He's out in AZ. I'm a little bit jealous. It's rainy here out in Boston, but I'm going to have him introduce himself, talk about his journey, and then we're going to dive into some combine training.
Yeah. First, thanks for having me. You're obviously one of the strength coaches that we just see eye to eye, and it's really easy to deal with. And I get a lot of your guys, and so it's been a lot of fun to talk back and forth. And it's nice to finally get on a face to face chat and talk a little shop. With that being said, yes, it is beautiful in Arizona right now. It's like 65, maybe 70 degrees. Some of the guys were running today with their shirts off. Um, but yeah, my journey, I guess, to Apex now, um, without getting too long and boring. Um, I guess I would start with, I was kind of on that. I think I was like 20 years old. I started training when I was 18, like right out of high school to a gym. Kind of like the general pop stuff. Got my certified personal trainer right away. But it kind of just wasn't for me. I knew I wanted to stay kind of a part of the athlete world. I grew up wrestling and playing other sports, and so I wanted to kind of stick around. And I was at that crossroad, kind of, do I go to college? I'm about to go to college. Do I get my CSCS? What's out there? I'm kind of fishing around. Um, and I landed I got an interview for an internship, and at the time it was called Fisher Institute in Phoenix, Arizona, and it was, I guess, what you would consider at the time Exos's like direct competitor. And they interview a bunch of kids, probably like ten kids, all for college credits, all of who are graduating. You know how the internship goes. And I was younger, but I did good in the interview, and they're like, okay, we don't normally traditionally go this way, but we're gonna choose you as one of the interns. And I ended up interning for 2 years. I went through the combine, the baseball, the MLB. That's kind of how I learned. Being in the field, I feel like I really get the most out of. Studying for my CSCS, even though I couldn't take it, I still had a bunch of schooling left to do. And then the owner, Brett, I was kind of finding my way in, and I was back at these crossroads, and Brett was like, hey, what's with the school? Are you going back? And I was like, oh shit, yeah. And I kind of noodled around the question. And he's like, because if not, we want to hire you. So now I'm really at a fork in the road. It's like, do I go back to this to try to make it back to hear what they're offering me? Or do I just kind of hit the ground running like I do? And so I was like, you know what, I'm in. And so most of my experience, obviously, I couldn't take the CSCS test. That was kind of a weighing option, but I did all my studying. I got the PES, which is kind of like the poor man's version. I learned from great physical therapists. I got to a point where, I was running all the camps, the MLB, the combine, the NFL. I was kind of making my way through. And my grandparents were very like school people, so they're pissed. So like maybe 6 years in, it got to a point where I got to sign off on intern credits for they come to learn from me, which was kind of a cool full circle. Um, and I worked there for about 8 or 9 years, and that's kind of where I got the bulk. And then it was just kind of time to transition into kind of doing my own thing, and that's kind of how Apex started. And I went out on my own, and I kind of built my following and my name in Arizona from there. And here we are today.
Yeah, I know we talked about we have some of our guys that go there, and I had visited when we were living out in Arizona. But full transparency, I talk about baseball training so much on the PBS CCS podcast that
Mhm.
as little baseball as we can talk about today, even
That's
though I know you
perfect.
do a
I
great
know there'll
job
be
with
little,
those
yeah.
guys. I know you do a great job with those guys, and I'm sure at some point we'll discuss it. But for my own personal selfish reasons, I want to talk about combine training with you,
Perfect.
because I don't know anything about it really. I've been around football a little bit. I love football training in the sense of, like, bigger, faster, stronger. You got to get after it. Like,
Right.
those guys are animals, right? And so I want to hear your approach to the combine and how you train those guys. And then maybe if we get to baseball, we get to baseball. But I
Cool.
want I want to try to avoid baseball as much as I can for this conversation. So I want to kick it off just like how much time do you get with those guys? What does that kind of cycle of training look like? And then we'll get into like the nitty gritty if you're cool with that.
Of course, I would love to talk about combine. It's the most hectic time of the year, so it's you really have to have thick skin because I call it the Wild West because as a strength coach, um, you only get 8 weeks with them before they come in first week of January. You traditionally get 8 weeks. Some guys who only do pro days get a little longer, but traditionally 8 weeks. So you're under this pressure cooker of 8 weeks where you don't really get to do the traditional, get them in, get them acclimated, build a base. You kind of almost have to, I wouldn't, you're not reckless, but you have to learn um, kind of how to ride the line and bend some rules that you normally wouldn't. And that's for me what makes the most fun and pressure. It's you're always sweating. Guys are getting ready for a 40 and sprinting. It's high intensity, it's high risk. So when it's all over and said and done, you feel like you take your first breath. And I think that's why I like combine training so much is it's like a small ball of chaos. It's
Yeah,
allowed
8 weeks is not very long, bro.
8 weeks is not long to put your name on something which is essentially a racehorse. So there's a
So
lot packed into a little bit of time.
yeah, so given that, like, are you training those guys specifically to like ace the test? Is there skill work involved? Is it a combo of both? Like you said, you're putting your name on this. Like, what is the top priority for you? Is it the 40? Is it the bench? Is it something else?
So the 40 obviously is reign supreme, right? You can have a great combine, and if you muff the 40, it looks like you had the worst combine ever. Um, so to answer your question as best I can without it sounding too, you could go either way. Obviously it is a test, a very detailed test. So you have to train very test oriented, right? There's a lot of details that go into the test that I think if you slip around, you leave a lot on the table. With that being said, I think a lot of the guys, if they're at least made it to that point, especially if they're going to the combine, they're gonna have probably a really good base of athleticism. Um, but I think it goes into knowing your athlete, who's showing up, doing your research, and filling the buckets they need. So let's say, to touch a little more on that, if I have a guy coming in and I know research all says he's a first, second round pick. I've done that, done the research. Am I going to spend, my 8 weeks filling the bucket of getting him better at football, or is he's already a first, second rounder? He can play football. So maybe only microdose the football side of things. That bucket's already pretty filled. Let's focus a little more on the test versus, I may get a guy who's not projected anything, a free agent. Hopefully we get him in a free agent camp. Now I kind of have to blend the two where he needs to be with the position coaches a little more. Whereas if he gets into a camp, he's going to have a lot harder of a battle getting on the field and staying on the field, where his athleticism needs to show up, if that makes sense. So then you got to kind of create this fine blend of not overcooking them, and this is where the communication with the position coaches, the speed staff, the strength staff, the physical therapy team, it all has to be on the same level because you're packing so much into something like that that if someone's not communicating something, it's really, really easy to overdo it.
How many
So
guys do you have during this window of 8 weeks?
so I have traditionally worked in camps of like 14, 15. However, since getting back on my own, you know, I want the product. I'm getting back into I took probably 2 years off of doing 10 years of combine. You take 1 year off, agents move on, the world has to spin. So getting back into it over the last couple of years, I've only traditionally taken like 5 to 8. That way I can really put the details into the guys that are coming in. If you get too big, try to go too big, too fat, you kind of lose the detail. So we try to keep our small, personal, and go really results oriented.
Do you ever go to the combine or do you just watch from afar?
I've gone a few times. I went last year. It's exciting, man. It's fun to see things unfold that you worked on. Um, it's a cool atmosphere. There's so much going on. There's everybody from the NFL world, players that have retired that are now coaches that you used to work with. It's kind of like a big meetup. So it's a ton of fun to go to Indy.
Yeah. So you talked about some of the things, especially with the 40, that if they slip through the cracks, you might lose some time on. Like, what are those like fine details? Are you allowed to give those, or are those like
Yeah.
too top
No,
secret for me to know?
no, no, no. So again, to not be too flat and broad with the answer, they're only going to get so technically good at the 40 within 8 weeks, right? Nobody's going to be that technical. So I think the main keys to the 40 is building the physical capabilities to run fast, raising the force ceiling, raising the reactive strength, really giving the guys the physical capabilities to run fast, and then polishing it up and unlocking any last little bit you can with the technical work. The start is huge. If you don't work on their stance and their first few steps of getting out and climbing through the 40, they leave a lot on the table. Little things like that. Most guys aren't going to look like a polished track athlete. It's only 8 weeks, so it's really just getting to understand the fine key concepts, and then just letting their physical abilities kind of take over and getting them through.
Yeah, and I mean they're all like physical freaks, man. It's just
Yeah,
like,
most of them are gonna be, already pretty physical. It's like polishing them up, cleaning things up, fixing their starts, teaching them when to rise, how they should feel to rise, not to just pop up and run. How to take that acceleration and transition it into top end speed. Little concepts like that is what we really hone. Again, you can only fix so many things. I've had guys that haven't figured out dribbles until the last week. So like you can only technically get so far, I think, with some guys, but you can, unlock those physical capabilities to get that last little ink out of it.
I would imagine that your groups that come to you are probably word of mouth and like success of your previous year, right? It's not like a guy is going to the combine every year. It's kind of like a one and done thing. And then their agents, if they have other guys that are in their agency, are kind of pushing them towards you. Is that probably a fair assessment on my end?
That's exactly how it works, and that's kind of where the pressure and the fun comes from because you can shoot yourself in the foot 1 year and lose an agency. And those guys are, you've just closed off a stream of guys that were coming in. So it is very results driven. It is very, high pressure, high risk, high reward. And I think that's what draws me back to it every year is that little bit of chaos. And I'm telling you, I don't think you sleep in the 8 weeks. You're always sweating. You always have to push the envelope a little bit where not to get we're not getting on the baseball, but where traditionally I get these guys so early in the offseason. I have the luxury of making these smooth audibles, easing them into things. When our combine guys get here, they get popped right in the mouth. It's immediately right into the fire. They don't have this, luxury little break-in period. It's get the smelling salts out and let's rip.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like for me, when I've always thought about the private setting, or like if I train some of our guys in the off season, like when I was back in Arizona, it's like, you talk about that build-in period for baseball players, and I compare that to the season, and I'm like, I like the training, but the goal is so far away that like I don't have that same rush of like when we're in season, it's like we got to get ready to win today. Like we need
Exactly.
this win bad. And for me, I feel that, and I'm always like, if I went to the private setting, like would I lose that kind of like sense of competitiveness, that fire, that like little bit of anxiety that comes with like if I make the wrong decision, like there's consequences to this like immediately. So like I can hear it in your voice, and like I'm just thinking about like that pressure. Some people it turns them off, and they just want like, hey, I just want to train somebody, like take it slow. I got plenty of time. And then some people are like, dude, we need to make these changes now because like this is coming up
Yeah.
fast. And so for me, I've always wondered like how athletic and competitive people get that drive in the private setting, and it seems like that's kind of where your bread and butter is.
Um, yeah, so you couldn't have said it any better. It's the same feeling, the same pressures, and it either makes or breaks people. You either want nothing to do with it or you're all in. Because if you're not all in, you really have to believe in yourself and trust the knowledge and the research you've done and the programs you put together and your instincts. Sometimes you got to make audibles on the fly. Sometimes you got to change it. There's always going to be audibles on the fly, and if you don't trust your coaching instincts, you get left behind. It's that fast paced that if you don't make those decisions, you don't trust in yourself and your staff, the product gets diluted. And those are the pressures that you know, when I'm going through it, I'm like, ah, man, I could do this to myself again. But when I'm done, I'm like, man, I can't wait till next year.
Yeah, you sit back and you see one of your guys excel in the 40 or like have a really good day or and he's going to move up the draft boards or whatever, like that has to be like the ultimate rewarding feeling.
It's exhilarating, and I would say being in the private sector, having that much time with the guys, where I really get my joy out of that is obviously the group you're around has to be the environment you create, makes it fun. But there's nothing better, seeing your guy on the mound and shove in season and just remembering when they get to the, you remember that feeling of when they went. You remember there's unspoken battles between gyms, when they look at how your guy's doing. And you know how the strength and conditioning world is. If your guy's not doing well, the strength coach is the first guy to get pointed at. So those kind of pressures are also the ones that I like from the off-season training. If your guy is, and sometimes things can just happen, but the pressures of, why does this guy keep having obliques? Where did he do his off-season training is the first thing they ask. So those little pressures I enjoy on this side of the off-season.
Yeah, and even for me, like if like you say, if a guy shoves in season, I'm like super happy for him because I know the work he puts in. And on the flip side, if he gets shelled in an outing, like I'm losing sleep that night over like, how can I help this guy? Even if it's mentally, how can I get him back on track? Like, because I know he's gonna come in tomorrow and something's gonna be wrong. Like, we're gonna have to address this. And so for you, I think that's the other side of that equation, right, is like it's not necessarily just the successes, but the failures, right? I'm sure you've had
It's a
guys
roller
at the
coaster. Yeah.
combine, right, that maybe didn't perform as well as you hoped. And it's probably like, fuck, I really missed out on this. We could have done that. Next year we'll address this. And to your credit, every time I talk to Bob, every new offseason, he's like, bro, this is what Justin's got for me that's new this year. This is what the guys got. They're always learning. They're always showing me new things. And like, that's not me just saying it. That's coming from guys that work with you. And I know, right? I see it. I came to your
I
place.
appreciate
I
that.
know the environment that you create, but for me, the strongest indicator for a coach is just what the players say about that coach when the coach doesn't know, right? And I've heard nothing but great things. I see it on your Instagram. I see you working with those guys. Like, I know the product is there and I know how much you put into it. And for me, I know like if there is a failure, that probably eats you up, man. And it motivates you, right? Some people it scares them away. Like people like ourselves, it motivates us when our guys or our girls, if we're with certain athletes, like if they don't perform the way we hoped, right? Like that's just how
You
it is.
couldn't have said it any better. I take it. People say don't take things personally. Shit happens, bro. I take it so personal that
Mhm.
it engulfs me. I always tell our interns and stuff, if you're gonna celebrate their successes, you better be there with them for the losses. And as a strength coach, at some point you are gonna take a loss. An injury is gonna fly across your page. And I take it so personally. Some of my athletes they're like, "Hey man, are you the one that got hurt?" I take it that personal of, when they're down, I'm down. I'll go back through my program and did I miss something? I did just because I take it personally. And those are the things that drive me. I still like those pressures, even though I don't wish it upon anybody, but when you do have someone that goes down, it's a low moment, and it's like, God, why do I do this to myself? But then on the flip side, it's the most cool fucking thing when you can see them come out of the ashes and come back even better. Um, and then it's those you have gone through that roller coaster together. That's an unreal experience. But the wins, the losses, the whole roller coaster of being a strength coach, I promise is not for everybody.
It's not, no, and it does matter. That's the other thing is like people say, we can't necessarily affect wins and losses, or we can, and like whether you think we can or can't,
I
we're
take it so
all a
personally.
part of it, right? Exactly, we're all a part of that process with those athletes, and we feel it either way. We feel it, and when they succeed, you take a step back and you say, bro, that was all you. You did it all. You put the work in.
100%.
When they fail, it's like, I failed you. How do I fix this? I'm telling you, I've lost
I
sleep like
I
nights.
lose sleep. You can ask my friends or people I work with. They're like, God damn. But even down to the little things, we have a one of our aces for Detroit. If he gets hit one day, I'm like, God dang, how can I, let me talk. How can I make this better? How can I, what can we
Mhm.
do? What I act like I just threw the game.
Right,
um,
100%.
but that's what I also love the most about it is you're so close. You spend more time with these guys in the off season than you do your own family, their own family. So it becomes such a personal thing that I think if you don't take it personal, um, you're not in it for the right reasons. You may lose some sleep overnight, but it's a small price to pay to be there for the big moments.
100%, man. So what does like a training week look like for your combine guys? Like you getting them 5 days, 6 days? Like how's the lifting,
But,
the running split? Like what does that kind of look like in
I
a
should have
broad picture?
I should have brought up. I have a schedule I made this year, but it's they're here every day but Sunday, and there's a midweek Wednesday like a regen day with physical therapists and stuff. But there's so much going on between working for the test, working you're doing max velocity sprinting, but also trying to find a way to get stronger. So guys are a little sore, and that goes against traditional. Hey, I don't want these guys to be, too beat up when they're sprinting. So you got to find the right placements. And if you're not getting them into the physical therapist to try to speed up any little bit of recovery you can, then you have position work. Like I said, you can't let them get too far from football. Once the combine's over, these guys still do have a camp they have to be ready for. Um, and so then you got to be on with the position coaches. So it's like everybody has to be in sync, or you get a wobbly wheel. Because you're on the gas so hard that if the bearings aren't all lubed, you're gonna blow a tire. Even with great training, there's just so much going on, and it goes against a lot of traditional principles. Um, that if you don't really have it all together, there's Monday, it's a big day. They have the 5-10-5 L drill, Tuesday, Thursday. They're running, acceleration day. They have a top end day. They have a position days. They have, benching. They're max benching a lot, which is still fatiguing. Um, it still crushes your central nervous system. But then I still got to run, a 20 on the day after, and their legs are still a little sore from Monday. So that's the kind of hectic. You'll laugh if you ever come to my house or my gym. I have whiteboards everywhere. 'Cause I'm a visual guy. I got to see, okay, maybe that doesn't really fit there. Maybe it does. And then, like I tell all my interns, then there's all the unknown variables. Maybe a guy didn't respond the way you thought he would. Maybe, he's sore longer. Maybe he stayed up all night one night stressing about his stance and didn't sleep and he's fried. So I think biasly, I write great programs. If I followed my own program to a T, I would kill somebody. Just because there's so many unknowns that pop up that you can't really prepare for. So you really have to be able to audible on the fly and regress and this actually isn't going to work. We're actually going to move this to this day. And there's so many moving parts that you really have to have the whole team to do it.
And that leads me to my next question for you is like, what does your team look like at the facility? Do you have the PT and everybody there? Do you outsource certain places? Like, what does your full team look like at your facility?
So my full team is I have my partner Wes, who was my intern back in the day at Fisher. Who he was the first intern I ever got to hire, and we've been best friends ever since. It's easy because he is me in a way. He has his own style, but because we were kind of brought up, it's easy. And he crushes it. He does such a great room, and I kind of let him take over the weight room. We hired another strength coach. His name is Matt. He was an intern. And he's a badass. He helps Wes. He aids in both the speed and strength. I kind of head up more of the speed stuff. In that time, I'm part of the weight room, part of the building and the program, but I kind of take a step back so I can focus on the 40 and those kind of things. We have in-house PT. We have a guy named Dr. Figa down the road who also jumps in on board. And then I have all my position coaches, and that's kind of a unique situation in its own. because I've been in the NFL world for so long and trained guys that have, passed through and retired, and we become friends over the years. And when they retire, they're kind of still looking for a way to hold on or be around or, keep that foot in a little bit. And I have this great rotation of my guys retire, and instantly I'm like, cool, you're now a position coach for me in combine. So I have all former NFL guys who have been there. They do all their board work. We communicate on their position stuff. It keeps all my NFL guys. They're like, okay, this is actually badass. I get to stay in the world, and then these kids get unique insight to what is the rookie camp look like? What is they get access that they normally wouldn't have had. There's great there's great position coaches out there that have never played, and it's not a dig at any of them. I myself think, I do great position work and I've never played at that level. But the insight that these guys have is something you can't put a price on. And the board work and the things they've seen, and yeah, this is on paper, but in the NFL, this doesn't really work. Um, and I think that is a huge, huge piece of the puzzle that I think a lot of facilities don't get access to. And so we're super blessed to have an amazing position coach staff, all former NFL guys.
Yeah, that's the one thing. Like when I was in the minor leagues, I would try to tell guys like when you get to the big leagues, like this isn't gonna fly. And like I hadn't been in the big leagues yet, so I didn't know for sure, but I just had ideas. But then those guys would move up, they would be around some of the other players that had been around for a while. They'd come back to me in AAA and they'd be like, hey, you were right about this. And it's like sometimes it takes that unique perspective of an ex-player or a
100%.
current player, a veteran to tell you like these things don't work. No matter what these people on the outside tell you, I know because I've been here, these things do or do not work. And that sounds like honestly a major advantage for your facility, to be honest,
It,
is just having
it's
those
a
guys.
it's a major advantage for us. Um, Even if they did nothing on the field, just the knowledge they get from being on the board or the questions they get to ask and have answered, that alone in itself to me is priceless. But then to have these guys actually put the cleats on, which they love, they're freshly retired or been, they get to put the boots back on, and now you get to see the other side of them be able to give back to the next generation. It's a pretty cool process in itself to see unfold, not just for the player, but for the coach as well. It's kind of a unique experience to see them come back as a coach.
Do you find that there are competitors for you in the sense of like other combine facilities, like that are talking shit or like trying to bash your players or like, is that a thing
Yeah,
for you
yeah. I
guys?
mean, I don't know if it's just Arizona, but the whole gym space in general is like that. It's very, you know, I've had guys who have never seen my program or talked about or anything, have goes at me. That's just the nature of the beast. Um, the combine, I don't think is any different. I think there's a lot of good coaches out there, and I've made actually really good friends with a lot of them. However, with that being said, there is an unspoken battle. There is an unspoken. They'd be lying if they said, when my guys ran, they didn't check the times. There is an unspoken, hey, competitiveness amongst gyms. And if there isn't, you got, you're not in it. You're not in it that deep. Everybody wants their gym to do good. Everybody, even if it's a friendly gym, in Florida, you still want to see what their guys are doing. They still want to see what you're doing. Um, and so there's a big time competitive nature that in itself. Same with the off season. It's the off season training. Out here. There's a big competitiveness. There's
Yeah.
not very many. There's a lot of gyms. There's not very many places that have top professionals. So it is very small, and it's not like Arizona versus everybody. There's a own battle within Arizona, whether anybody admits it or not.
That's because you have that beautiful weather out there, man. You can always
It's
get
gotta be.
outside,
It's
right?
gotta be. It's got them all stir crazy.
Well, on that
I
note, I mean, I appreciate you like sharing with me and just
oh,
opening
bro, yeah.
up. And before we like, wrap this up, is there anything else that we haven't hit on in terms of combine training? I mean, I know it sounds like it's chaotic, it's fun, it's a lot of pressure. I mean, just listening to you talk, it sounds like you really enjoy it. As fucked up as that might be, like,
No,
is there
you
anything that we
gotta
kind of missed along the way?
you gotta have a sick taste. Um, But I would say if anybody's thinking about getting into the combine space, it's definitely better to start smaller, focus on the details. It doesn't take much to mess up a combine camp, and you mess up a couple combine camps, you kind of get the door shut on you. So it is very detailed. You got to like the chaos, and you got to bend. I have my own pillars on how I like to program and things. There's going to be times where you have to go against your own, things you wouldn't traditionally do to push there's things you have to get done and there's no way around it. So you kind of have to find that. And the way I think we do best about this, we do a lot of monitoring, a lot of force plate monitoring, little thing, even down to if it's, their grip strength, monitor their grip strength. And if there's a drop off somewhere, any little indicator, we make them take, like self-awareness tests. How did you sleep? How did it, and we try to give ourselves as many indicators as we can, because it is so high intensity and right away and soreness, and a lot of things can go wrong in that. So if there's anything that uh, we can ever give ourselves, any little weapon to give us an indicator of like, hey, we need to adjust for this athlete, we'll go all the way down to a grip test if that's what it takes. Um, but I would say that is just have it all together, have a plan, and go at it.
Be ready to adjust. It sounds like it's just such a fine line that you have to walk, man. And
It's a fine line you have to walk, because if you back down from it, the results drop. If you overdo it, the results drop. So you have to find that area of, I want to push it far enough, um, without anybody. So it's like a fine little piece of art you got to paint.
yeah, I love that. I love that. And I genuinely appreciate you talking some combine with me, man. I've learned a lot from you in this time. I appreciate our
I love
friendship
it.
over the years, and I appreciate you taking care of our guys. And have a good Thanksgiving. And obviously, combine season's coming up, so best of luck to you this
Yeah,
year.
we'll have to check in during combine, and I really do appreciate you, and I appreciate the work you do. It's nice to see the person on the other side and who the guys all talk about, because essentially I get to bake this nice cake, and I get to pass it to you, and then you get to take care of that cake and bake it a little more, and uh to see the finished cake at the end with two people is a pretty cool thing. So I appreciate all the work you do for the guys, and like I said, just what you bring to the table for us, I've really appreciated. So
Yeah,
enjoy
yes,
your
sir.
Thanksgiving as well. I'm sure I'll talk to you well before combine, but we'll check back in during the chaos.
Yes, sir. I
If I
can't
have a
wait to
little
hear
redness
about
in my eyes.
it. I can't wait to hear about it, my man. Have a good Thanksgiving. We'll talk soon. Thanks, buddy.
Brother, I appreciate you.